All right, welcome back, guys. I've got a little brass test planned here for 223/556. And the reason we started this was in the last 556 test videos, we were testing the 70 grain Hornady GMX bullet, and it did not shoot well. And I was using some PMC 223 brass, and I questioned whether that might be the cause of the crappy groups, and you guys questioned it as well. So what I want to do today, I've pulled out my stockpile of brass and tried to identify some different head stamps to test with. And as you can see, I've got 10, and this wasn't even close to all of them. Like, I could do this with 15 different head stamps if we wanted to, and we may get to that eventually. But let me show you what I want to do first. Just kind of test the waters of this, because there are a lot of variables in play. And one thing I want to warn you about in the beginning is, I'm going to test one load in all of these pieces, all of these types of brass. I'll tell you what, let's talk about the brass we're going to test. So we've got 5 different head stamps that I want to test here in today's video. And so the first is PMC 223, which is what we shot before. The next is some Federal 2013 head stamped 556. We've got some good old Wolf 223. We've got some Norma 223, which kind of represents the higher end. Norma is very good brass, so this is premium brass, and also some Hornady 223, which is also pretty darn good brass. So we've got a couple cheap ones, we've got a couple expensive ones, and I would put the Federal 556 somewhere solidly in the middle of pretty good brass, but maybe not up to Norma or Hornady, and that's certainly all debatable. So I've got 10 pieces of each of those head stamps. And what I want to do is pick a load and just load all 50 of these pieces, and then go out and shoot some groups with 2 different guns and just see if we see anything drastic. To be totally honest with you, I don't expect a whole lot of difference, but we're looking for a big change. So the first test gun is going to be my own Colt LE 6920, 16-inch barrel, 1-in-7 twist. That'll be our first test gun. The second gun is this guy. This is a Palmetto State Armory kit that we upgraded with a Midwest Industries rail. This is my nephew's 556 AR. So this will be our second test gun. This guy will have this 3-9 Leupold Mark AR scope on it, and mine will have one of the vortexes, or actually the same vortex that we've shot on it before. So each brass, 5-shot group in each gun, and we'll just see if anything materializes. There are a lot of variables at play, in play here that could screw this up. Different cases have different case capacities. So you really need to work up loads separately with different brass. Just like changing bullets, you want to start over and work up your load again. Changing brass is kind of the same way if you're really going for that precision. So the load I'm going to choose is 23 grains of AR comp, loaded out to 2.260, which is full magazine length. And the bullet we're going to shoot is the 69 grain Sierra Match King. I know that both of these guns like this bullet. They've both shot this bullet well. And at least my gun, I know it likes AR comp, and I think we've shot some of that in my nephew's gun, but I can't remember for sure. So we'll see. But I'll just warn you, we may get to a brass that shoots well in one gun and doesn't in the other. That's certainly possible. We may get to brass that shoots bad in both guns, but with a little load development, that brass would be fine. So a lot of variables at play, but I figured we'd just kick things off here with this first video, shoot 50 shots and just see what happens. If we need to get more complicated with it, we can do that. If we need to test more head stamps, we've got those on hand. So I don't know where this is going, but we've got to start somewhere, and that's what I want to do today. So this is mostly 223 brass. The Federal is 556. I've got a lot more 556 brass to test later. Yeah, I just kind of had to pick a couple. The Normas and the Hornadys were really the only high-end brass, I guess you could call it, that I had on hand. So those were the only two. So those were 223s, and then so yeah, whatever. But those are the five we're going to use. The PMC, the Federal, and the Wolf all have crimped primers. So the PMC, I've already sized and primed and everything. These guys are ready for powder and bullets. The other two, I'll be removing the crimp on those with the RCBS military crimp remover, and then the Hornady and the Norma don't have crimps, so nothing to worry about there. So that's kind of first step here. I need to run through some brass prep. I want to trim them if they need trimmed. I'm just kind of going to give them the full treatment here as far as brass prep goes, and then we should be on the range shooting here in a couple minutes, because that's what's interesting about this video. So I have just about skipped over all of the reloading on here on this video, which isn't like me, right? I normally subject you to every excruciating detail, whether you want it or not. But today I'm running a little bit short on time, and I absolutely have got to get these shot today. So all these cases, of course, were resized with my Redding small base resizing die. No issues whatsoever there. I trimmed them all, and every single one of them except there were two of the Wolf cases that did not get trimmed, or no material got taken off, and I measured them and they were just a couple thousand short of trim length. So that's good. So the vast majority of these are exactly the same length. I removed the military crimps on the ones that needed it. I chamfered and deburred the case mouth on all of them. And yeah, so they all got the same treatment, with the exception of the PMCs. They were all resized today with the exact same die and the exact same setting. They were all trimmed with the exact same trimmer on the exact same settings. We are using CCI number 41 primers. They're all from the same package of primers. So tried to minimize the variables here. So I'm really interested to see what happens. I think the most likely outcome is that we don't see squat as far as differences. They all shoot within the margin of error, I would say. Tell you the biggest difference between between these different types of brass and qualities of brass. Norma is by far the most expensive and best brass out of this lot, and they have got the most amazing primer pockets. You seat a primer into a really, really good piece of brass. It's both very tight and very smooth at the same time, which is it's a weird it's a weird thing to explain, but the primers go in so tight, but they just glide right in very smoothly. So all right, I'm almost done, and then by God, we are headed to the range. And we will see how these guys do. There we are. Let's go do this thing. All right, so it is time to get started with our brass tests. So I've got 2 lines on the target there. So all the Colt groups are going to be on the top. All of the Palmetto gun groups are going to be on the bottom. We are going to get started with the PMC and just work our way forward from there. I have shot some sighters through both guns, so they're both kind of warmed up, ready to go. I'm warmed up, so no excuses here at the beginning. So starting off with PMC, let's see how they shoot. I do have my Caldwell chronograph out front here, so we should be able to get velocity, see if there's any velocity differences between all of these brasses, between all this brass. Here we go. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention is that the range is 70 yards. As you'll be able to hear in the background, the range is packed today. Lots of people shooting. Gun season, actually, gun deer season starts tomorrow. So I'm lucky to have gotten this 70-yard range. But I think it's good enough for my purposes. All right, let's see how the Palmetto State Armory gun shoots. Very windy today. I'm trying to wait it out as best I can. It calms down every once in a while. Okay, back to the Colt, and our first head stamp, or our second head stamp here is Federal 13-556. Okay, Federals with the PSA. I can't believe I screwed this up, but that was actually Hornady brass. Yeah, frickin' now my target labels are all wrong, but crap. All right, so the second target is Hornady, and then next here we're going to go on to Federal. So everything's going to slide to the right one, and then Hornady's going to go from the end back to number 2. What a mess. All right, here's our Colt with Federal. All right, the Palmetto barrel. Okay, moving on to Wolf with the Colt. Okay, Wolf with the PSA. Hey, finally a decent group with the Palmetto gun. I think a lot of it's my fault, and some of this group tightening up is my fault. Getting used to this optic. It's been quite a while since I've shot this optic. It seems to have a bit of parallax error, and getting a good, consistent cheek weld seems to really matter. Yep. All right. Last up is Norma. Okay, Norma with the Palmetto. Okay, my first reaction is I don't really see anything that freaks me out. Interesting that Norma was the highest velocity. So I'll tell you what, let's pack up, get home. I might try to measure case capacity out of these guys now. Yeah, so let's get back to the bench. All right, before we get into looking at our results, I wanted to take some case capacity measurements of our fired brass. And the way I like to do it is you take the empty case and you weigh it and record the weight of your empty case. Then you fill it full of water. And this is a little bit tricky, you know, getting them equally full. Because, you know, the surface tension of the water, you can, yeah, whatever. But I fill it full of water and record that. And then you just, you know, record or just, you know, calculate the difference. And that gives you your case capacity of water. So that's what I'm doing. Unfortunately, I'm an idiot, and I didn't keep the brass separate from which gun it came from. So some of these are going to be fired from one gun and some from the other, which is going to skew things a little bit. But I'm hoping it won't be too much. So let me finish taking these measurements and doing the filling out my little spreadsheet and doing the calculations. And then we'll see what we can make of the results. So I have made a complete and total mess out of this target, but that's fine. That's how my brain works. Let's look at a couple things really quick. In the blue are the group sizes. I don't feel like I did my nephew's gun justice. I was kind of fighting that scope a little bit, and I'll tell you already, this needs a whole lot more testing before I'm ready to come to any serious conclusions. And so I'll probably be borrowing his gun again, and we'll probably throw one of my Vortex scopes on it just so I'm more comfortable, you know, more familiar with it, and maybe takes a little bit less for me to get consistent with it. But it didn't shoot bad, right? The first group had some horizontal stringing, kind of weird stuff going on, but the others, they were a little over an inch. There was one under an inch, so not terrible. My Colt shot very well. The worst group was the first one at 0.98 inches, and the best was the Federal group at 0.48 inches. So for 70 yards, that's very good. The other thing to keep in mind, this is a load I've basically worked up in my Colt. So I know it shoots well. I know my gun likes this powder, and this gun I'm not so sure about, so we may need to bring some other powders into this testing, or yeah, I don't know. So just, I feel like we're barely scratching the surface here. The next thing I want to draw your attention to is the green here, the green circled numbers. We've got, so Norma, which is number 1, I numbered them by case capacity, from my water test. 1 doesn't mean it's best. I gave it number 1 because it had the smallest case capacity. It was the heaviest brass and had the smallest case capacity. So it had the highest velocity as well in both guns. So Wolf and Federal were tied. Tell you what, let me pull that up really quick. Yeah, Wolf and Federal both held 30.6 grains of water. Hornady held 30.7 grains of water, and the PMCs held 30.9. So 30.9, 30.7, 30.6, and 30.2. So that doesn't sound like a lot, but that's a pretty big jump to Norma. So Norma was by far the heaviest brass, and it had by far the smallest case capacity. But to give you an idea of how small of an amount we're talking about here, on my scale and the syringe I was using, 1 drop of water was about 7/10 of a grain. So all of these were basically within 1 drop of water as far as capacity goes, but we saw that it was significant in velocities because, so the purple here are velocities and standard deviations. So the highest with the Colt was 2795, and the slowest was the PMC at 2733. So my gun followed it exactly. So the fastest was the Norma, and then it went down to the slowest was PMC, which has the largest case capacity. Not that, I'm not trying to say that matters. I'm just explaining the results we got and the velocities we got, and just saying that, yep, it makes sense. The case capacity measurements correlate to velocity very clearly. Same thing on my nephew's gun, except for Federal, which for some reason it was the slowest. But if we move Federal to the slowest, then the rest kind of followed. So 1, 2, and then the third was the Hornady, the 4th was the PMC, and then the Federal was just bringing up the rear. I think that was probably an anomaly, and if we shot more, we would probably see them gradually work back into their natural placement as far as case capacity and velocity goes. So that's a pretty significant velocity change, I think, from 2733 with mine, 2721 with his, up to 2795 and 2782. So 60 feet per second was the result of 1 drop of water's difference in case capacity. The other thing I wrote down here is the green below the names. What these are the standard deviation of the case weight and the standard deviation of the case capacity. So for PMC, 0.84 was the standard deviation in case weight, and 0.22 was the standard deviation in case capacity. The ones that are surprising, Normal was by far the best. 0.23 grains of case weight standard deviation and 0.16 grains of water weight deviation. So expensive brass, it was the heaviest weight, and it was pretty significant. I didn't write it down on here because, kind of ran out of space here on the sheet. But Norma averaged, as far as weight goes, 102 grains, 102.3. The lightest was actually Federal at 95.5 grains. So about 7 grains of weight difference in brass. but the next, so like I said, normal was 102. The next heaviest was Wolf at 98.2. So even it was 3 grains lighter than Norma. So Norma, big, heavy, beefy brass, very good, weight, consistency, and very good consistency with the amount of water that it holds. So I hope that made something like a bit of sense. Like I said, this is a mess. So what do we take away from all of those crazy numbers I just rattled off? At this point, I'm not sure that we can take away much. Very small sample size. Very, very, very small sample size. But I feel like this is, well, most importantly, I would say none of them were terrible, right? None of these shot a freaking 4-inch group or something crazy. So I think already we could say all of these brass were fine for normal ammo, like most of us are loading, right? So what initiated this were the poor groups I saw with the 70 grain Hornady GMX bullets. What this tells me is that it probably wasn't PMC brass. It probably wasn't the PMC brass fault. I don't see anything here with PMC brass that makes me worry all that much. I mean, but having said that, it did shoot the worst group in both guns. So, not by a lot. The second worst in my gun was Norma. So, I think the sample size is maybe too small, but I definitely want to keep testing. One that I'm a little bit surprised about is Wolf. The average case weight deviation was very small. It was very consistent as far as the amount of water it held. So from this, very small sample size here, Wolf is pretty impressive. It was, pretty impressive brass so far. So, and in the same note, Hornady was a little bit disappointing. 0.88 grains of standard deviation on the case weight. Capacity was pretty good, but the case weights were a little bit all over the place. So I think that covers it. I don't know how worthwhile this video is. I don't know if it answers any questions. It probably brings up more questions than it answers, but I think it's a good start into a topic that I want to explore. As I said, we've got more head stamps to test. I can get a hold of even more, and I want to continue this because I find it fascinating. And cheap 223 brass or cheap 556 brass is laying around on the range everywhere. So, if I pick up a bunch of Wolf brass, it'd be nice to know whether what I can expect from it when compared to others. So one that I definitely want to test is Lake City. I've got a lot of Lake City. That's mainly what I shoot is Lake City, and I've had good luck with it. So want to test Lake City, want to test a bunch of others. So I'm just going to kind of throw this video out there and, see what you guys have to say. See if you can, if there are major flaws in my process or in my thinking here. If there are tests you'd like to see between brass that might help illustrate these differences, let me know. If you're paying $60 or $70, $100 for Lapua brass and you think it's worth it, tell me why, and I will try to justify your purchase. So I think that it certainly doesn't cover it, but that gets us started. So I will see you guys next time. Lots more to come.